Hi everyone, in today's video I will be doing an ink and watercolor drawing of the Big Ben in London. Now the paper I'm using is a watercolor book from Hahnemuhle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's the paper I'm using, and as you can see it's a new sketchbook. I've just opened it up and you can see the cover is very textured and it actually looks very nice with their logo embossed at the back. And what I like when I first saw the paper is that it's got a smooth texture. It's not too textured, but it is quite thick, and I like that about it. And another thing is when you lay the paper down, as you open and work through the book, it lays down flat. So you can do a spread on 2 pages and you know it's going to lay down flat. I'm using the Pigma Micron pens for this one, and I'm going to do a wash with my Mont watercolor paints once the illustration is done. So for the initial sketch I'm using a regular Staedtler Tradition HB graphite pencil. It's just your ordinary pencil. And now I am using a reference photo for this drawing. And the eraser I'm using is the Faber-Castell PVC free eraser, so PVC free eraser, and a usual ordinary Adele sharpener for sharpening my graphite pencil. So now as I'm doing the sketch, it looks like I'm actually drawing very fast when you have the video sped up like this, but I'm actually drawing it very slow. This actually took a lot of time to actually draw. But you need to pay close attention to your reference photo that you're using, or if you're painting from a live subject, or you're painting at the site, or painting a building or drawing a building or sketching, you need to pay close attention to the perspective. In this case, the viewer is below and viewing a close-up of this particular angle of the Big Ben, and you're going to see some of the shadows underneath the different areas because you're obviously below the building. So pay close attention to your reference photos or the subject that you're drawing. Look at the angles, the perspective, the shadow areas. The detail can be as detailed as you want it to be. You don't have to include everything. You can see now after I did the sketch, I'm going in with the microns and I'm just getting in all the details. Now I start putting in more details in there. Basically the initial sketch is just there to help you as a guide, so that when you're working with the micron pens, you can actually get the detail in there, because the micro pens or the illustration with the pen or the ink work, that's what's actually going to make the drawing basically bring it to life. You're going to basically portray all the details you want to, and you can even leave out some things. You don't have to include everything when you are working or drawing an illustration like this, which is so detailed. I myself did not include every single thing. Some things I did leave out, but as long as the major elements of the subject are depicted so that it looks like, for example, this is the Big Ben, it should look like the Big Ben. But you don't need to include every single detail that you see, because some of it, especially if you're painting or drawing from a real building in front of you, you're not going to see every little detail. So it's actually a good idea to take a photograph of, if you're painting or drawing a live building, or in front of you you're drawing a building. Take a photo so that you can get a close-up of certain, zoom in and see some of the details that you want to include in your final drawing. Now another thing I noticed with this paper that I like is that when I'm using the micron pens, it's not bleeding through the paper. The paper is quite thick. It's sort of a card-like paper but with smooth texture. And when I go over with the watercolor washes, I'm doing multiple washes for this illustration, but there's not going to be any buckling of the paper as I'm doing the washes of color onto the paper. So definitely this is a paper I would recommend to anyone doing watercolor sketching, drawing. It's definitely one that I'm going to be using going forward. So now I'm still working through with the micron pens. I'm getting in all the details. Although I do have my graphite pencil sketch down, I still have certain areas that I need to refer back to my reference photo so that I can see if, for example, the number of windows, if it's correct, if I've included all the shields correctly. I think I may have left out one or two, but as long as it just has the idea of the Big Ben, what is on the Big Ben, it's fine. You don't need to have every little detail in there. And I am going to come through again a little later once the illustration is done and do some the shadow areas and the more finer details to bring the Big Ben to life, or so to speak. So now I'm going in with more of the details, adding some of the shadows and the darker areas to the tower. And now I'm going on to the clock face. Now you will see with the clock face, I did not include every single thing that you see on the clock face. The reason for this is when you're doing any drawing, if you include everything, it may look good if you look at it in a photograph or if you're looking at it live, but when you try to depict that in the drawing, it can actually look like clutter, like you've got too much going on, and you can actually lose the beauty of your drawing. So I would highly recommend that you need to sit and really look at your reference photo, look at the building or whatever subject you're drawing, and decide how much of that you want to depict on your drawing. How much do you want to illustrate? What you want to leave out, what can be left out, what can't be left out. Because if you include everything, sometimes it's difficult to portray all of that in your drawings, and it can actually make your drawing look too busy, and it'll actually it won't give the beauty of your actual drawing or your illustration once you're done. So decide what you want to leave and what you want to include. I did exclude quite a few things on the face of the Big Ben, but they're quite minor things. You may not even realize that they're not included on there unless you really study the Big Ben's the clock face, then you may pick it up. But like I said, it's an illustration, it's your depiction of what you're seeing, so you can decide how much detail you want to include and what you want to include. You don't also have to make it so detailed and realistic looking. You can make it more illustrative and much looser than I have done here if you'd like to do that. There's no right or wrong in art. Whatever you want to depict that's your art, that's what you want to do. So now I'm going in with the pen again, and now I'm adding all the finer details and just refining some of those line work and some areas that I needed to add more shadows in, and some areas that I needed a darker emphasis on the certain areas. I'm just going through with the microns for that. I'm using the different microns, anything from a 0.3 to 0.5, 0.8. It entirely depends on what I'm working on and which pen will work better, a thicker nib or a finer nib for finer details. I'm not using just one throughout. I am changing from one to a finer one to a thicker nib for especially the thicker areas which needs very thick lines to go down. Okay, so that's the finished illustration with the microns. Now I'm just erasing all the graphite pencil. A tip to remember when you are going to erase, make sure that your ink is dry before you start erasing to avoid any smudging. It can happen that you may smudge it not realizing that the ink is still wet. Now I'm going in with a wash of color. I'm not using a very dark color initially. I'm starting off lighter, but remember in this case I am going to go with multiple layers and start adding shadow areas now later as I'm painting. But you can see obviously the light's coming from the front of the tower or from front of the clock or Big Ben, so on the side will obviously have more shadow area because that's where the shadows falling. So I am going to be coming through with another layer of shadow areas, and I'm also going to brighten up the sort of a yellow ochre brown color of the building. I am going to brighten that up on this side and also add more shadows on the other side. Doing the same thing with the sort of a blue gray, and I've got a mixture of a yellow ochre with a little bit of brown tint sort of in it, so that it can actually have the actual colors of the big pen. At this stage, you're basically just doing washes and defining those shadow areas, and also keeping the areas light where the light is reflecting a light. You don't want to get those too dark. So I guess that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to like and share, and don't forget to subscribe. Till the next one, bye.